So, got this news yesterday, and this is truly, truly heartbreaking. A Missouri man has been executed for murder despite pleas for clemency by advocates who say he had an intellectual disability. Ernest Johnson received a lethal injection on Tuesday after the U.S. Supreme Court refused to consider a stay of execution earlier in the day. The 61-year-old's pleas for leniency had received support from Pope Francis and 2 members of Congress. Johnson killed 3 convenience store workers in a 1994 robbery. Attorneys for Johnson argued he was ineligible for the death penalty because multiple IQ tests have shown he has the mental capacity of a child and still reads at a 3rd grade level. Johnson, a black man, was born with fetal alcohol syndrome after his mother drank heavily during her pregnancy. So, again, that's heartbreaking. Let me show you. This was his last words, official final statement. DOC has made available a last statement from Ernest Johnson dated yesterday. I am sorry spelled incorrectly, and have remorse for what I do. I want to say that I love my family and friends. I am thankful of all that my lawyer spelled incorrectly, has done for me. They made me feel love as if I was family to them. I love them all. For all the people that has prayed for me, I thank them from the bottom of my, I think that's supposed to say heart, but it doesn't. I love the Lord with all my heart and soul. If I'm executed, I know, no spelled incorrectly, where I am going to heaven, because I ask him to forgive me, God, everyone. And with respect, with spelled incorrectly, Ernest L. Johnson. So there was a Supreme Court case in 2002, and in that case, they said it violates the 8th Amendment protection from cruel and unusual punishment to execute people who have intellectual problems. So if you have very low IQ, if you have, I don't know if they would go as far as to say if you're on the spectrum autism-wise, or if you have to be fully autistic, or if, maybe somebody with Down syndrome or something like that, they're not allowed to put you to death if you committed a crime and you don't really fully understand the consequences of your actions. And it's based on the theory that you don't really know what you're doing. So there's an element of, choice that is granted to people who have full mental capacity. They look at you like you could have not committed the murder or whatever. But the more somebody struggles mentally, whether it's IQ-wise or mental illness or whatever it is, at some point, everybody agrees, well, that makes no sense. So, for example, if somebody is a paranoid schizophrenic and they are literally hallucinating and they're just not connected to reality at all, and they think that somebody who's trying to help them is a demon, and they're fighting off the demon and they stab the demon to death or something like that, well, we all realize that's a tragedy and that's a crime and that's terrible and some action has to be taken, but should that person be put to death? Well, if they really didn't know what they're doing, they don't have agency. So to say, kill them, you would have to say the system is acting just as barbaric, if not much more barbaric, in reaction to the crime. See, that's the fundamental contradiction of the death penalty, is like, we're going to prove murdering is wrong by murdering you. What? That's classic, like, do as I say, not as I do stuff, which is the hallmark of bad dads. I think the fact that the Supreme Court didn't intervene here is almost overturns that 2002 Supreme Court ruling. Now, their counter-argument as well, there was planning that was involved in his killing of the 3 convenience store workers during the robbery. I don't know, that strikes me as kind of up in the air, because it could have been planned to do the robbery, of course, but if a robbery goes wrong, then, maybe he didn't have the intent to do it, but he did it. I'm obviously not saying it's a good thing. I'm obviously not saying there shouldn't be consequences. But the idea of the death penalty, I mean, if you're saying even somebody with the intellectual capacity of a grade schooler can be put to death for this, then you're saying there are no limits. So why not execute the paranoid schizophrenic person? Why not go further than that and execute people for much lower level crimes? And then, of course, you have the problem. The death penalty, the issue with the death penalty overall, in my mind, is 4% of the time, according to a study from years back, we kill the wrong people. So in other words, you go through the whole trial process and still at the end of it all, 4% of the time, people get executed when they didn't even commit the crime. So if you're okay with the death penalty, you're saying, I'm okay with the state murdering people, innocent people, 4% of the time. So murder is okay sometimes if it's done with a process that found the wrong conclusion. I'm not okay with that, and I hope you're not okay with that either. So, and I've often said, are there instances where I see a heinous crime and I think the person does have full mental capabilities and I don't feel bad for them if they get found guilty and sentenced to death? Yeah, and maybe that makes me a bad leftist or whatever. But this is not one of those instances. This is one where if you believe in the Constitution and you believe in the Eighth Amendment protection from cruel and unusual punishment, I think this is an open and shut case. You could have all the sympathy in the world for the victims of the crime, without a doubt. But you still would have to say life in prison or life in some sort of facility that can help with his mental disability. But the thing is, like, beyond that, he also did, according to all the reports, he's shown complete remorse through all the time. So if the idea is rehabilitation from crimes, mission accomplished. The guy's rehabilitated. He feels terrible for what he did. He knows it was wrong. Now, some people could fake that, and it's like, okay, well, what do you do in that situation? These are all complex things. But what's not complex is this punishment doesn't really fit the crime, given all the facts of the situation and given our Constitution and the Eighth Amendment. So executing a mentally disabled, effectively, person, that's not okay, man. And we are one of the few remaining countries that does the death penalty. Not just few remaining developed countries, few remaining countries that still does the death penalty. So it is heartbreaking. Oh, final point is, this one really gets me. So the stay of execution wasn't granted, even though the Pope said grant it, Congress people said grant it, a former governor said grant it. So he said, for the love of God, please, could I have the firing squad instead of lethal injection? The response was a swift no. So he had succumbed to his, hey, this is my fate, this is what's going to happen. Can you at least do something that I won't feel probably any pain at all if you're in front of the firing squad? I mean, one bullet to the brain and you're donezo. You're out of there and there's probably no pain. They said, no, we're going to do lethal injection. Now, there are reports that he had labored breathing for a little bit before he finally died. And this is the problem with the lethal injection, is it's set up to make us feel better about what we're doing because it seems like medical and serious. But a lot of evidence suggests that, especially with the new lethal injection cocktails, there's been a lot of horror stories. People not dying for 30 minutes, people foaming at the mouth, people seizing. So in other words, people feeling extreme torture and pain before they die. And again, he had labor breathing before he died. So on the way out, for good measure, it wasn't just, we're going to kill you. We're going to torture you too. Good riddance. You always want to try to avoid... You don't want to become the demon that you're trying to avoid. You don't want to become the evil actor that you're trying to prevent. And oftentimes people do that. In order to prevent these terrible things, I will do the terrible things. That's not smart. And that's not just. That's actually really, really stupid. And this is a classic example of that right here. And it's heartbreaking.